Hello guys, Happy New Year! Welcome to my first video of 2019, and today we're going to be doing a camera comparison between my iPhone XS Max and the Google Pixel 3. Yes, I've finally done it, and I wasn't necessarily planning this to be my first video of 2019, and I wasn't really planning on making this video at all because obviously I don't have a Pixel 3, but I got to borrow one from a friend from work, and I got to borrow it for a day to test out the cameras, and I was obviously really excited about this because these are two of the best smartphone cameras on the market right now. And some of you might say that I'm a little biased because I'm an iPhone owner, and you might be right, but then I actually already kind of knew that the Pixel 3 camera would be better even before I got this phone because of how amazing the Pixel 1 and 2 cameras were. And believe it or not, I have to say this, I really have no attachment to any sort of devices or brands. And you know, even when I'm comparing two iPhones, some people get mad at me for some weird reasons. So just keep that in mind, and let's take a look at the photos. So here are the first examples. We have the image from Pixel 3 on the left and one from the XS Max on the right. And I put the metadata from the photos on the bottom left corner to show you guys the aperture and the shutter speed and ISO. And these are obviously extremely advanced computers, and there's a lot of processing happening inside the cameras even before we see the photos. So I don't know how much meaningful these numbers will be, but I just put them there as a reference so you guys can look at them. But at least on paper, these two cameras are extremely similar, and they both have 1.8 aperture, and the size of the sensor are exactly the same, and they both have 12 megapixels. The only difference that I could find is that Pixel 3's lens is 27mm equivalent, and the XS Max's lens is 26mm equivalent. So when I look at these first examples, they actually look very similar. I would say the XS Max's photo is slightly brighter, and the Pixel 3's photo has a little more contrast, but the brightness probably comes from the slower shutter speed and higher ISO. So it's kind of interesting to see how these cameras adjust to the environment. And when you zoom in, about the same sharpness. And again, I'm zooming in a little farther on the XS Max because it has a 26mm lens instead of 27. And other than the fact that it's a little brighter, there's not much difference at all. And here are second examples, and yes, Michael is back. He is a vegan now, and he's a fantastic model, and he's also looking for a girlfriend. So if you're interested, please let me know in the comments. And these photos were taken with Michael facing directly into the sun. And the main difference that I see is that, again, Pixel 3's photo has more contrast, while the XS Max's photo has more dynamic range. Both of these photos were taken with HDR auto mode, and again, it's quite interesting to see the difference in the numbers. The Google Pixel 3 took the photo with much higher shutter speed but a little higher ISO, and the XS Max took the photo at about half the shutter speed but still quite fast at lower ISO. And another thing that I noticed is that the XS Max's photo has a slightly more background blur, which is weird because these phones both have exactly the same size sensor, and these photos were both taken at f1.8, so I don't know what's causing that, but just one difference to notice. And the next photos were taken with me facing the sun, and as you can see, both of these cameras are showing really bad glares, although some might argue that this can be used quite tastefully, and the numbers were really different on this one. But in terms of brightness, they look pretty similar. And when you zoom in, at a first glance, you would say iPhone XS Max has a little more contrast, but I think that's just because of the glare on the Pixel 3. But in terms of the way they render the color and light, I think I'm liking the Pixel 3's photo more, but I could be happy with either one of these. The next one is a portrait mode example, and again, the numbers are dramatically different, and because the iPhone XS Max is using the telephoto lens for the portrait mode, the aperture is different on this one. And at a first glance, not a whole lot of difference there. I would say the iPhone XS Max's photo is slightly darker, even though it's using a dramatically slower shutter speed, but they both look pretty good. And when you zoom in, if you look at the top of his hair and the size of his beard, I would say the Pixel 3 does a slightly better job cropping the fine details, but weirdly, iPhone did a better job cropping his ears. And I think this tells me, just based on this one example, I think iPhone's portrait mode works based on the distance from the camera and the subject, and Pixel 3's portrait mode crops the subject based on contrast. So I think that's why it did a much better job cropping the hairlines, but couldn't really distinguish his ears because it has much less contrast. But that's just my guess. And here's another portrait mode example. And again, because the iPhone XS Max is using the telephoto lens, it was kind of hard to get the same cropping, but I managed to make the subject look a little similar. And again, both photos look pretty similar and they both made plenty of mistakes. And one thing to notice here, the table on the iPhone XS Max's photo is not blurred, while on the Pixel 3 it is blurred. And if this photo was taken with a real DSLR, I think the actual result would be somewhere in the middle. I think the Pixel 3 blurred it a little too much, and the XS Max's photo, it looks a little unnatural. And when you zoom in, again, in general, Pixel 3 did a better job cropping the finer details, but then again, it also made some mistakes where the XS Max didn't, so you can be the judge of that. But I would say overall, Pixel 3's photo looked a little more natural. And next up is a sharpness test, and I took photos of the hot sauce bottles on my desk. I would say the iPhone's photo is very slightly sharper. This could either be because the iPhone took the photo at a slightly higher shutter speed, and also the iPhone sensor is optically stabilized, not digitally stabilized, so it would be more ideal in a situation like this. And when you go to a different side of the image, it's pretty much the same story. And the next one is a low light photo, and this was taken without the night sight mode on the Pixel 3. And as you can see, the iPhone's photo is obviously much darker, and the Pixel 3's photo is a lot brighter because it used a much higher ISO. And I don't know why iPhone's ISO didn't go up as much. Maybe it was letting the user to control the brightness if they wanted to and make the photo look more realistic, which really doesn't sound like what Apple would do, but that's what happened. And here's an actual night sight photo from the Pixel 3, and it is pretty clear who the winner is, but I think the XS Max did a pretty good job as well. The XS Max's photo certainly looked more realistic to what the scene actually looked like, and the Pixel 3's photo is slightly oversaturated to my taste, but it's prettier. And here's the non-night sight mode, and the photos now look a lot more similar, but the Pixel 3's photo is a lot more saturated again. And now let's take a look at some selfies. And unlike the back cameras, the front-facing cameras are a little more different on paper. The iPhone XS Max's front-facing camera has a slightly smaller aperture and also a slightly narrower focal length. So if you're taking a selfie with a group of people, the Pixel 3 might be a better option. And if you're taking a selfie by yourself, theoretically the XS Max's camera will give you less distortion. I would say in terms of image quality, these photos are very similar. I would say the Pixel 3's photo has more contrast, while the XS Max's photo came out a little brighter. And this was the portrait mode with the front-facing cameras. And I would say I think I like the Pixel 3's camera a little better. I like the fact that it has a little more contrast and the blacks are a little darker. And I think it did a better job separating myself from the background, not just with the blurriness, but also the brightness. So to summarize, I think both cameras did a great job, and in general, I think I'm leaning slightly more towards the Pixel 3, but the XS Max really wasn't far behind. I think the Pixel 3's portrait mode on both the front and back cameras were slightly better, and also the night sight mode in the nighttime is extremely useful, but the iPhone has a telephoto lens, and also probably because of the Smart HDR, it had better dynamic range in most cases and more realistic colors. So I think straight out of the camera, most photos were better on the Pixel 3, but if you're someone who likes to retouch and edit your photos after you take them, I think the iPhone might be a little better choice for you, but it's totally up to you, and you really couldn't go wrong with either of these cameras. So just a short video today. Thank you guys for watching. I hope this is helpful, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.